Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. Have you ever encountered something paranormal? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I mentioned this in another post, but I'll drop it here too. My mom was diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer in 2009. It was a struggle, and the doctors didn't expect her to pull through, but she did like a champ. My mother is a fighter, and as she puts it, refused to let cancer kick her ass. Fast forward to 2012, and she decided to undergo reconstructive surgery. The surgery goes well, and she's put into recovery. She spends a day drifting in and out of consciousness, which was expected after a surgery like that. The whole time, she's still hooked up to a morphine drip to help with her pain. After being reassured by the doctors that everything was fine, we decided to go to our homes and shower and sleep. My sister elects to stay just in case anything goes down. Fast forward to the next morning, and my sister is calling me in tears, saying I need to get to the hospital right now. I rush up to the hospital and am pulled aside by the doctors, who tell me that my mom has suffered some complications from the surgery and is in a coma. A half hour goes by, and my stepdad arrives. I live by myself closer to the hospital, and the doctors pull him and me into her room. They say that her lungs are filling with fluids at a fast rate. They say she is unlikely to recover, and we need to make a decision to keep her on life support or pull the plug. We refuse to let her go like that. 3 days go by, and my mom starts showing some cognitive activity. By the end of the week, she fully wakes up. The relevant part happens after she wakes up. She looks at my stepdad and me and asks when we came into the room. We tell her we've been here all week. She seemed really dumbfounded by this and replied that she'd only been in the room for a day or two. She then asks where her grandmother has gone. This creeped us out. My great-grandmother passed away in early 2007. When my stepdad tried to explain this to her, she replied that she had spent the last couple of days with her talking about the family. She said that grandma got really weird and told her that she couldn't give up because she had children to take care of. According to my mom, around the time Grandma said this, Mom became aware of us being in the room, and Grandma was gone. It was really weird to hear her talk about it. To this day, she has no recollection of being in a coma. She knows she is now, but all she can remember is spending a few days in the hospital with my grandmother talking about the family. I was walking in the woods with a buddy of mine, and we came to a pretty open area. There were multiple trails that branched off of the area, and we were deciding which one to take. My friend stopped me and claimed to have heard a rustling in the trees on one of the paths. He was being cautious because some deer can be aggressive where we live. I'm looking around for a deer or a bunny, but I see a pretty long and gray tail quickly wisp away down the trail. I thought maybe it could be a cat or something, so we shrugged it off and kept walking. After a few minutes of going down the trail, I heard a really loud crack to the left of us, and holy shit, it was an all-gray bird, even the beak, about 5 to 6 feet tall with a tail. As soon as it made eye contact with us, it shot so swiftly up in the air that I thought it was levitating and flew like a mother in the opposite direction. I felt like I encountered a legendary Pokemon. It was truly amazing to witness something so weird. Here goes. A few years ago, I moved into an old one-bedroom apartment in Melbourne, Australia. This was the first time I had moved into my own place, and it was nice to not have crappy, stealing roommates. The apartment block, which only had 8 units, was built in the 1930s. It was moldy, and the rent was interestingly cheap. The first few months go by without a hic, and I'm enjoying living in the place. I come home from work one day, and I go into my bathroom. Something catches the corner of my vision. The boards that cover the manhole in the ceiling that has access to the small attic space is broken into 2 pieces on the ground. I remember standing there for about 2 minutes trying to make sense of it. I examine the 2 broken bits of wood. The wooden board is about an inch thick, and it would have taken Bruce Lee to break it in half. My initial thought is that the landlord may have sent an electrician around without informing me, and they may have been working in the attic space and broke the board, if that makes sense. But the more I think about it, the less likely that scenario seems. Anyway, I take a couple of pictures and email them to the landlord, asking if anyone was on the property that day, with an undertone of me being a bit pissed off that she didn't tell me. I received a reply at around 7:30 a.m. the next morning. Her email reads, "Please call me as soon as you're able to." I was worried, thinking that someone had broken in. I call her, and she explains that her last two tenants said the exact same thing happened to them, among other things, and she will send someone around to replace the wooden board. If I wasn't so busy with work, I would have thought more about it. I lay awake at night for the next few weeks thinking about what the F caused the board to break in half, and my first conclusion is that someone was living up there in the tiny attic space of the apartment, which seemed very unlikely. About a month later, I wake up suddenly around 4 a.m., which is very unusual. I have so many goosebumps that it feels like someone is rubbing their hands on me. Everything has been silent for ages, but then I hear this weird sound coming from the roof above my head. It's this dragging sound. It looks like someone is pulling a sack of potatoes along the floor. I freak the F out, and I'm frozen stiff with fear. Someone is up there for sure, I think. There's no way a possum would make that sound. After about 5 minutes of listening to this intermittent dragging sound, I work up enough courage to turn on the light and walk into the bathroom, where the manhole is, armed with a cricket bat I keep next to my bed. The new board covering the manhole is broken into two pieces again. I felt sick. I turn on the bathroom light and stare at the black space where the cover on the manhole would be. As tough as I like to think I am 100% frozen with fear. The dragging sound has stopped. The whispering was clear. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. It was coming from the effing attic. Please let me stress at this point that I'm not making any of this up. The whispering sounds like children's voices. It's gibberish mostly, but there's one sentence that I can make out. "It's your turn. It's your turn." It keeps repeating. I turn on every single light in the apartment as well as the TV to try to make things feel normal. It's about 5 a.m. and it's still dark outside because it's the middle of winter. I'm watching TV to try and unwind. Then the fuse blows and everything goes silent. My pet Budgie in the kitchen, who never makes a sound at night, starts squawking like he's being strangled. I've never heard him make these sort of noises. He's literally screaming. I grab my car keys, run the F out of my apartment, and go sit in my car. I wait until the sun comes up. People are now walking their dogs and starting their day, and this comforts me enough to go back to my apartment. The front door is open, but I don't think too much of it because I figure I booked it out of there so fast that I didn't close it. Everything seems normal, and I go into the kitchen to check on Dexter, my pet Budgie. He's not in his cage. What the F? I let him out most days to fly around, but there is 100% no way of his getting out unless someone lets him out. I started to feel sick again. I look around everywhere but can't see him. All the windows are closed, and the wire mesh screen door at the front door was closed when I came up. I open the door to the bathroom. Again, I open the door to the bathroom, and I can hear a splashing sound. Poor little Dexter was half drowned in the toilet. I take him out, wash him, and dry him off. I thought he was going to die because he was breathing water. I was so confused. The only logical explanation is that someone did this. About 8 a.m., I called the landlord and gave her a watered-down version of what happened. "Oh wow, you heard the whispering too," she said. "I stayed in that apartment for another 18 months. I only moved out 3 months ago. I heard the whispering again on a few occasions, and twice the manhole cover moved but wasn't broken. The landlord called me last week. She sounded embarrassed and said that the new tenants, a young Japanese couple, had begged to speak with me about some of the shit that has been going on there. F that, it's their problem now." I mean, I don't really know what to make of that. It definitely sounds creepy, and I guess if that was me, I'd be freaked out for sure. I don't know if I would have stayed there, so 18 extra months, good for you. Glad you're alright. It's wild. Back when I was in Boy Scouts, I spent the night on an aircraft carrier. The staff in charge of watching us chose me and 3 of my friends to be on fire watch. I think they made it up, but we believed them. Our job was to go check the ship for any fires or any other dangers every hour. We went on one tour with them, and then they took us to their break room. We spent the next hour watching some Indiana Jones. Then we went on to the next check. This cycled until about 3 a.m. At around midnight, they told us the people who had died on the ship when it was in use. They said they had old surveillance footage of terrible stuff. Up until then, it was really fun. On this check, we were afraid. We approached a hallway and heard an odd noise. It sounded like a child. We were a little freaked out. Why would a kid be on the ship this late? We were on fire watch though, so we had to see what it was. We walked down some stairs and into the hallway. We had one flashlight between the 4 of us. All of the lights were off here, so everything that wasn't hit by our light was pitch black. Hallways stretched down in every direction, but ropes cut off the ones that were closed. Along the way, there were mannequins everywhere. Each one made me jump as the light revealed its face. Then we saw the kid. He was sitting on the floor, crying, down a hall cut off by the ropes. For 1 second I thought it was a ghost. Finally he started talking. He was 4 years old and with his dad for the night. He had to go pee, so he got up to find a bathroom. He somehow got really far away. We took him back to his bed and explained it all to his dad. Then we went back, finished the second Indiana Jones movie, and passed out. It was a really weird night, and it still freaks me out. This one is kind of long and hard to believe, and if you don't, I can care less. I'm just answering the question. My first home where I was born and raised always felt like something to call home during the day, but at night, it seemed like there were always something around the corner or right behind you. I felt it, my cousins felt it, my parents always ignored it. Strange stuff will always happen, like doors opening and slamming themselves, waking me up, but that wasn't the least of my concerns. One time at night, I was reading a book while lying down on my floor with half my body in the closet, I don't know why, and the power was off. Immediately chills ran down my spine. Almost a second later, I hear a deep-toned growling right behind me and ran crying to my mom, knocking over a lot of stuff. It was pitch black. She yelled at me when the lights turned on and didn't believe me. I begged her to let me sleep with her that night because I just didn't feel safe at all in the effing room. I had no other choice but to just try to think it was my imagination and sleep in there anyway. I woke up to my head hitting my bed frame and my right leg being dragged into my closet. God damn, I'm getting chills just remembering this. I knew someone was in there and wanted me to look at it, but I didn't. I screamed my lungs out, ran straight to my mom and cried all night, telling her what happened. She got mad at me for waking her up and being a girl. My family's rather tough, I guess you could say. That night, I slept at the foot of her bed, shaking, trying to only look towards my mother because I had just had this haunting feeling of someone or something standing right behind me just staring. A bunch of other stuff happened in that house, but that was by far the most terrifying for me. Cop here. I posted this story before, so it may sound familiar. I was dispatched to a house at about 1 a.m. for a Prowler. We get there and talk to the residents. Long story short, they saw 2 people wearing masks, one Jason-style hockey mask, I don't remember the other, in the yard across the street. It was like 2 weeks past Halloween, so it seemed believable. We checked the area and don't see anything. 10-8. It's worth noting that the residents didn't seem drunk, high, or crazy at all. A few times, you'll get a similar call and get there to find out the residents strung out on meth and seeing things. However, back to the story. An hour later, we get called back. This time, we have our dispatcher on the phone with them while we're surrounding the area. We, about 5 of us, are in a perfect position. Dispatch tells us they can still see the Prowlers in the next yard. We start to move in. The dispatch says the residents saw the 2 Prowlers wave and move into the shed. Guess where I am? That's right, next to the shed. I give verbal commands. Bang on the door, nothing. F it, fine. I'll come in after you. Doors open and empty. I even thought to check for a trapdoor. Nothing. It is raised about 4 inches, so there isn't even a possibility of a door leading out. Again, checked the area and find nothing. I talked to the residents. They said that as I was moving in on the shed, the two put their fingers to their lips, giving the shh sign, and then they both waved. They moved into the shed as I was next to it. We went over every possibility, trying to come up with an explanation. If the caller was just effing with us, they had no prior history of it, as in repeated calls for services at their address. I'm not much of a believer in paranormal stuff, but I can still appreciate a situation where I cannot logically explain what just happened. When I was 5, I lived with my grandparents on a farm that was built in 1912 because my mom had joined the army while she was single, and the army won't let you have a kid without family. The original owners had been shot, killed, and buried in unmarked graves behind the barn. Years later, someone poured concrete over the graves. Over the course of the 3 years I lived there, every single night I would hear dishes by the sink rattle, one grow against the floor. We would wake up every morning to find broken dishes on the floor. I'd also been pushed multiple times, and I used to play with the small kid that I guess wasn't real. I would play tag with him. It was a few months ago, and I just moved into my new student house with a few friends. They'd all gone home for a few days because it was summer break, but I stayed there. So there I was at home alone, and it was an awesome first 2 days. But then things started to get a bit weird. For example, a small thing had been moved, like some of my notes or the TV remote. I just assumed that it could have been the wind or something. The next few days, I started to hear noises in the night. Not like loud noises, but more like small whispers, as if someone were in the house trying to be quiet. But I just thought it was my brain playing tricks on me. The night after that, I heard a door slam. And when I say slam, it woke me the F up, and I went to sleep like the dead. So I got up and started freaking out because the bathroom light was on. The light switch is on the inside of the bathroom. I went to try and open the door, and it was locked. The light turned off, and the door was unlocked. No one was in there, but I screamed and hid under the covers for the rest of the night. Needless to say, I stayed up all night, then went home to my parents for a few days until the other guys came back. When I explained it to them, they called it bullshit, and nothing has happened since. Last Friday, a family friend took a header out of his camper and really messed him up. He lay there for hours before he was found. He died 2 days later, and I knew he died because my dad sent me a text waking me up and telling me about it. I even told my girlfriend about it. I thought it was strange that my dad would text because he hates texting and has only done it once that I can even remember. I'm saddened by the text and go back to sleep. The next morning, my dad calls me to tell me that a family friend died. I say, yes, I saw your text. My dad never sent a text. The message wasn't in my history, and my girlfriend had no idea what I was talking about. I think I dreamt it all in the same night, possibly even at the same time that he had died. It's by far one of the strangest things I've ever seen. About the time I was 17 or so, a few friends and I were out at the beach making dry ice bombs in the middle of the night, probably midnight or so we were quite delinquent back then. There were about 5 or 6 of us, and we were just chilling and having a good time, trying to make potholes in the ground with dry ice bombs in the sand. It was a quite foggy night, which isn't too unusual considering I live in the northwest coast, Oregon, and it rains here 300 days out of the year. After 30 minutes or so of being rambunctious teenagers, we decided to walk down the beach for a bit. After probably 10 to 15 minutes of walking, we hear strange scratching or grinding sounds and stop and listen. Sooner than 20 seconds later, a tall figure emerges from the fog adjacent to the ocean, but between us and the ocean. Effer had to be at least 8 feet tall, and it was dragging a chain. Not just your average chain, but like an effing massive chain that looked like it was used for an anchor or something. The rings were probably 8 to 12 inches long. and it looked like they had to be at least an inch in diameter as well. Now, this chain wasn't short by any means. It was probably 40 to 50 feet long, and this dude was just dragging it in the sand behind him in the middle of the night. We all sat there silently, and I got the biggest shiver down my spine. All my hair stood on end, and my breath seemed to escape me. We gathered, watching the figure cross our path and make its way up the beach. It and the chain slowly faded out of sight. Well, that was effing creepy as hell, I thought. We then continued back down the beach to a shipwreck called the Peter Iredale, which is all but eroded by now, and we took in cool sea spray and enjoyed the ominous whooshing of the serene ocean waves. We toss a couple dry ice bombs into the water and head back to our car, where we were parked probably half a mile up the shore. As we're walking, we hear that effing noise again. My heart thumps, and I get the cold sweats. It was the place where we saw it the first time. There was no drag marks in front of him, no footsteps, and no indication that anyone had laid foot on the ground in front of him in the path it had previously walked. The sand was dry, and it wasn't washed over by the waves or anything of the sort. We watch it for a moment out of curiosity as to what the actual F is going on. We stood there dumbfounded, watching the figure trudge through the sand with this unfathomably massive chain dragging behind it. It stopped dragging the Satan chain and stared directly at us, piercing our soul and the essence of our being. We stood there, jaws dropped, staring back at the shadowy figure. It begins to slowly march toward us, and we effing book it through the sand. I've never run so fast in my life. We all pile into the car, Bro turns the engine, and we effing floor it out of there, easily hitting 80 miles per hour on the straight stretch of the access road. Abso-effing-lutely hauled serious asses out of there. The entire time I was staring out the back window of the car, some reason expecting it to be the Terminator after us and catch up to us. Thankfully, it didn't, and I never saw the shadowy figure again. It was the strangest, most heartbreakingly terrifying thing that I've ever experienced. None of us were on any drugs. We were all straight-edged kids, clean as a whistle. Effing shadow figures and their chains scaring kids. Shame on them. A week or so later, a friend of ours who wasn't there with us that night told me that people used to practice black magic in the dunes there, and that there were artifacts of demonology and inverted crosses scattered about. I called bullshit on his accusations of such occurrences. It turns out it was true. I went to the mom and asked her about it, and she said she had heard similar stories, so naturally, we looked into it a bit and then went to a search for said black magic devil worshipping sites. We were able to find some inverted crosses, which were made of some sort of metal that was all but rusted over and concreted. Blocks are probably a cubic meter in size in a few different places, with holes bored through them and metal rings inserted through them, as if to be an anchor point. I put two and two together and theorized that the effing chain was at one point connected to these blocks in the dunes, for Lord knows what purpose. I assume the creature was of black magic or demonology and will never set foot in those effing godforsaken cursed dunes of devilry again. TL, DR, had an encounter with a demon dragging a Satan chain at a beach.